Naomi Tutu. I am a priest associate here at All Saints, and I pop in here from time to time and preach way over the Episcopal 11 minutes. So I promised the panel that I was going to try and keep my input this afternoon to less than the 15 minutes I was assigned. And so our task is to talk about the moral obligation, the moral founding for our spiritual awakening on democracy and climate. And so as a Christian, I start from Genesis, of course. And that for me, our moral responsibility starts when God looks at what she has created and says, it is good, right? So God's first look at God's work on this planet is, look what I have done. It is good. And therefore, as a Christian, I am raised that my responsibility is to move our planet back to that space where God can again look at our planet and say, it is good. And it is good means it is good for all of humanity, but it also means that it is good for all of creation. And so we are placed on this planet made in God's image and given stewardship over creation. And stewardship is not ownership. Stewardship does not say that everything on the planet is put here for our use. It is that everything is put on the planet for our care. And I always say to people, so that if people say, and I've heard people say, well, it actually says God gave us dominion. And it is that God had dominion and handed it to us, right? And what did God do? God created. God did not destroy. So if God is handing us a responsibility that God has held, then our responsibility cannot be to destroy. Our responsibility must be to copy, if you like, what God has started. And so when we say we have dominion, for me, that says we have responsibility. We have a responsibility to be looking at our world and trying to see how do we get ourselves to the place where we know God is looking and says it is good. And so I want to also come at this as a first-generation immigrant to this country, a person from the global south, where if you look at the impact of climate change, it has been felt most in the global south for those who have had the least to do with actually causing climate change. And I think that for me the tie-in there is when people in the global north, particularly in the West, when they talk about democracy, it is democracy at the level of the nation state. So I'm always leery when there is a conversation about US democracy, because I was one of the people who suffered so that US corporations could continue to profit from apartheid South Africa. And that for people in much of the world, US democracy has been sustained on the oppression of people, particularly in the global south. That where democratically elected leaders have been overthrown, assassinated by Britain and the US because they stood against US economic, whatever it's called, privilege, rights. And so for me, when we talk about a spiritual awakening around democracy, I I think that we have to expand our vision of what democracy looks like. And so maybe this is democracy Mark 4. So we said that we were at 3, right? Who was talking about that?
David.
David, yes, you said we are at 3, right? This is Mark 3. And so now we're looking at what does democracy Mark 4 look like? And I think that democracy Mark 4 has to be a global movement around empowering people all over the world to have a say in at least their daily lives, in at least what happens to the resources and the labor of the people in their community and their country. And the system that we have right now is not set up for that. And when we say that it is difficult to even locally to be thinking about those who are strangers as we plan our work, that do we have the same care for strangers as we have for ourselves, how much more difficult it is clearly than to be thinking about strangers who we might never see, whose daily lives do not impact ours in any way. We can at least say that the unhoused in Atlanta, we see. At least we see, and maybe for that 5 minutes, we are uncomfortable in our car seeing the person at the side of the road saying, "Homeless vet, please help." And then we maybe take out $5, or else we pretend we don't see them. Whichever thing we do, but that there is at least an impact on our lives for those 5 minutes. Well, I'm talking about the millions, billions of people whose daily lives we don't see at all, and they don't impact us, or at least we think they don't impact us. There is no way that the people in Congo, we see maybe one story every 6 months about what is happening in Congo, what is happening in Ethiopia, what is happening in Sudan. So we can live our daily lives without paying attention to that. But for me, as a Christian, I am taught that my neighbor is anybody made in God's image. And that is all of us. So when we talk about a spiritual awakening, I think that I go back to what Reverend Wallace spoke about, a Kairos moment. And that indeed we are in a Kairos moment. And I don't know whether Reverend Wallace said that, but my understanding of a Kairos moment is a moment that offers great danger and also great opportunity. And I cannot think of anything more true to where we are today. That we are not just in the US, but as we look globally, that we are seeing more and more people in the global north willing and in fact welcoming authoritarianism into government, saying that this is what is going to solve our problems. And so a Kairos moment to me is a moment that offers us an opportunity to go to the most radical place in our faith. And I'm using radical in the original meaning of the roots of our faith. And the roots of our faith are that we have a responsibility to one another, a responsibility to creation, and a responsibility to our Creator. And so in this place of danger and opportunity, I will offer you an African part of me. So I always tell people I am at my root African and Christian. That has been who I have been all my life. And there is an African proverb that says, In the time of floods, the wise build bridges, the foolish build walls. And it is saying to us that in a time of crisis, of moral dilemma, those who recognize the truth of the moment look for ways to reach out and find new allies, new community members, so that people who can bring in different perspectives on how to solve a problem. And the foolish look for ways to further separate themselves, find scapegoats, find somebody to blame for the problem rather than a way to come out of this problem. And that to me is what we are in. We are in a Kairos moment that our moral obligation is to build bridges. Our moral obligation is to find ways that we can, no matter where we are, who we are, how we are living, where we are living, can make a way of reaching to those who are not right now members of our community, to be a larger community in trying to solve the issues that face us all. And my last point, see, I'm at the Episcopal 11 minutes. I'm almost done. That's an Episcopal sermon. It should not be more than 11 minutes. Right? No, you said we could have 12.
On a good day, 12.
Oh,
Your father or Michael Curry.
So, you see now I forgot what my last point was. So my final point is that for me, we stand at this moment and we need to look around the room, to look at the faces that we've already known, the people that we've already been working with, but also look for particularly the faces, the organizations. I've been writing down names of people and places that I had no idea of, to be able to reach out and build those new bridges. That to me is our moral responsibility.
Yeah.
It is to take care of one another and to take care of this wonderful creation that God said, it is good. And she's just waiting to be able to say that again.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I warned the panelists when we met that I was going to throw at them, asking them simply to respond to my Episcopal 11 sermon. Please introduce yourselves and then make sure that you introduce yourself and your primary affiliation and then speak to whatever you would like to speak to. You don't have to respond to me.
Thank you. That was such a compassionate and full of feeling sermon, if I can call it that. My name is Shamsa Malik, and I belong to the Ismaili Muslim community. I am fairly new to Atlanta. I was in Los Angeles for most of my life. So this hurricane weather alerts are very new and comes with a little bit of anxiety as my parents are alone at home waiting for me to get home to them. So anyway, but I think this conversation is so beautiful, and as a Muslim, Naomi spoke about this relationship that exists between God and between human beings, and human beings to human beings and the rest of the creation. Islam also talks about the same relationship that we have, and we usually, when we're looking at it like visually, we're like talking about, this vertical relationship which is with God and the man himself or the person himself or herself, and then there is this horizontal relationship which is to other creation and other human beings, and it is this relationship that inspires every bit of creation to be respectful, allow the full expression, allow its fullness to appear in creation, so that when God says, in my case in Quran, he says that I've created the creation so that people who think can reflect on the beauty or on the purpose of creation, then everybody in creation is inspired by that. And I'm also a religious education teacher, have been for a long time. I remember teaching about this very story about a healthy debate between humans and animals. This is like a whole old philosophical story, which eventually ends in a conversation where humans are at a superior position because of the intellect that they have, and this ability to reason and this ability to reflect on, the purpose of why is it that they were given this intellect to look after the rest of the creation. So this relationship of, us being the vicegerents of Allah, of God on this earth to care for each other creation, is very, very crucial to our understanding in Islam as well.
Thank you, Dr. Malik. Thank you, Rabbi Rosenthal. Reverend Tutu. I love your 11-minute sermon. So as a Christian, I think about the teachings of Jesus, and there's a part of Matthew chapter 25 where Jesus is separating the sheep and the goats, and you want to be in the sheep and you don't want to be in the goats. And he's talking about feeding the hungry, water for the thirsty, food, clothing for the naked, medicine for the sick, welcoming the immigrant stranger. And as I think about all 5 of those issues in ways that we have fleshed out throughout the course of the day, those are all climate-related issues. Those all have massive moral implications and also massive equity implications. At our last table, we were talking about the class bias of disaster. So this hurricane, most of the people who are affected by it here will probably be able to rebuild, but in places like Haiti or in the Dominican or other countries, long after the storm has come and gone, long after the Weather Channel has come and gone, there are massive implications for things like drinking water, the ability to grow food, soil that has come and gone. And so there's a long-lasting implication for the communities that didn't cause it, but that suffered first, hardest, and longest. So I think those are really important moral implications of climate change. But then I think about, well, what might be our role as people of faith, and specifically for us, for me as a Christian. I see our role as containers of hope. We are imbued with this notion of prophetic imagination, to imagine a world that isn't yet, but that could be. And then to think sort of like, what could that future look like? That's why I'm so excited about being part of solutions and talking about things like, what do we call it, resiliency centers and the Beltline. That was so inspiring to me. There's funding available for it, and Naomi's writing down everybody's names. And that's the whole idea of this whole conference, is like, let's imagine what could be, like the prophets have been doing for a long time, and make the case for it. It's economically wise, and it's good for our bottom line and everything else, but it's also like, because it's better for us when we share what we have, when we see our pronouns as we, us, and all of us together, life and community, as opposed to just me, myself, and I. We are better people. We are happy people. We are living into our higher selves. It is better for all of us. I think the last thing I would offer is that we don't have to accept the world as it is. And there's a huge role. Land is history. I mean, Andy Young was talking about this, and Gerald Durley was talking about this, the whole notion of soul force, of a city that could say to the country, and in many cases the world, you don't have to accept what is currently happening. You can imagine a new future, you can work toward a new future, you can participate towards God's dream in the world, and that's exciting. And I think that's part of what we're called to do.
So thank you, and I'm honored to be here. I'm Lawrence Rosenthal. I'm a rabbi up in Buckhead, just a few miles away, at a synagogue called Ahavat Achim in the AA, and I also have the great privilege of being the board chair for the Georgia Interfaith Power and Light. My executive director, Cody, back there, I appreciated all the words you said earlier today, and everybody, just very inspiring. So thank you for this wonderful panel and your wisdom on all of our different faith traditions, which are all part of each other in many ways. And thank you to Reverend Tutu for starting us off. I appreciated you starting in the book of Genesis, because that's really where I also wanted to kind of emphasize as well. There's no such thing in the rabbinic tradition as translation. There's only commentary. So whenever a text is translated, it is more of a commentary than it is actual translation. Of course, it's almost impossible to really translate a text that's 3,000 years old, because just the ways in which we speak and the ways we understand words, even if we get them as accurate as possible, we just understand the concept of that word differently. So we are created and we are placed into a garden. I think many of us in this room probably know that story. Reverend Tutu really focused on it. The idea that we're placed in the garden, and then it tells us what we're supposed to do. That God wants to be in partnership with us. The power dynamic might be off balance, but that doesn't matter because it's God. So we can live with that. But God wants us to be in partnership. And what does God say? La'avda v'shamra, ul shamra, right? And oftentimes that's translated as to tend and to till. Now those are farming tools. I'm a city dweller. I'm also from Los Angeles. We talked about that earlier. So I have no idea what tending or tilling actually is. It's probably tools that I've never touched before. But again, it's about the way we translate those words. Tending and tilling do make that dominance, right? Make that, what was the word you used? So dominion, right? We use those terms. Those are big terms. Very few of us ever use that in our daily life. So again, commentary, right? These are not good translations for us. So, because it does set us up as we are dominion, we dominate over it, which means we can do whatever we want. We know what it looks like when we as a species dominate things, especially dominate other people, right? It's led to disaster. So what is Avda v'shamra? So Avda is a spiritual word, avodah. We use this in our spiritual language. Prayer is an avodah. It is a action. It is work, right? So we consider avodah to be kind of a worship sort of thing. What the priest did in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem was avodah. Right? So avda, where that's the first piece that we often translate as to tend, it's not to tend. It is to worship. It is to take care of. Right? Vishamra then is also, we use it as till. Again, I have no idea what tilling is, but shamra is definitely, in the way we understand it, not till. It means to guard, to protect. Shamra, Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et Shabbat. The people of Israel will guard the Sabbath, not till the Sabbath. Doesn't make any sense, but it will protect and to guard. So that word is really to guard and to protect. So that becomes the beginning of the story. That's why we're placed in there. Then many of us know where the story goes, right? There was a tree we weren't supposed to eat from. The tree, of course, there was a snake, right, that was in there. A lot of metaphoric language, and there has to be something deeper. The end of the story, of course, is the tragic conclusion of us not fulfilling what we were there to do. And what does it say? V'yigaresh et Adam, right? Again, often translated as the man was driven out. We know where that goes, where that story goes. The mystical tradition of Judaism does something very interesting. So there are three words in that sentence. V'yigaresh et ha'adam. Adam is man, human being. By the way, Adama is ground. So Adam and Adama have the same word. And of course, many of us know, like created from the ground. Right, the person was brought up from there. The Garesh is to drive out. Grusha in rabbinic language is a divorcee. Right? So you can kind of get that, to be divorced from, to drive out. But the word et, very small word in between. The Garesh et Adam. Right, et is in, I know you were all like, did I sign up for a grammar class? Et is what we call in Hebrew is the definitive article. Rather than V'yigaresh Adam, he was driven out a man, it's et Adam, the man, right? Definitive article. It makes it a very specific person. But the word et is interesting because it begins with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which of course God is the first and the last, right? That's what we often say in our prayers. So the mystical tradition takes the word et and says that's another nickname for God. So now read the sentence. V'yigaresh et ha'adam. The man drove out God. And that's what happens when we don't take care. When we don't live up to our partnership. V'avda v'shamra. When we don't pay enough tribute to the land and we don't guard it, then what we have done is we've driven out God. So what's going to happen in the next few hours is that people are going to suffer. People are going to suffer. And suffering is antithetical to a life with God. So what's happened now? We have not lived up as a people, as a species, we've not lived up to our responsibility, and so therefore, God has been driven out. And now our job, and God willing, all of us together, in this wonderful way in which we're going to make bridges, is that we're going to help bring God back in to this humanity. And the way we do it is by living up to our partnership, which is to serve the land and to protect the land. So thank you.